The auction hall was cold. Not the kind of cold that came from weather, but the cold of metal walls and recycled air that had passed through 1,000 lungs. Tay stood in a line with 40 other humans, his wrists bound by glowing restraints that hummed softly against his skin. He did not move. He did not speak. He only watched dot around him. The galaxy's wealthy walked past like shoppers in a market. They were tall creatures with pale blue skin and 4 eyes that blinked in pairs. The Novans, masters of an empire that stretched across 300 star systems. They looked at the humans the way a person might look at strange fish in a tank. Small, one of them said, pointing at a woman near Tay. What use are they? Novelty, another answered with a laugh. They come from a world so far away that most maps don't show it. Rare, exotic, perfect for parties. Tay listened. He always listened. 5 years ago, he had been a military officer on a colony ship heading to a new world. The Novans had found them drifting through space. They disabled the ship in minutes. The soldiers who fought back died quickly. The rest were taken dot. Now he stood on an auction platform in a space station larger than any city he had ever seen. His uniform was gone. His rank was gone. Everything that told the universe who he was had been stripped away. To the Novans, he was just another product. A young woman stood next to him. Her name was Hannah. She was an engineer, or she had been before the capture. Tay had watched her during the transport. While others cried or screamed or gave up hope, Hannah had studied the walls of their cell. She traced the lines of the metal panels with her fingers. She counted the bolts. She was learning. On his other side stood Sue. He was older, maybe 60 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. Sue had been a slave for 3 years already. The Novans had taken him from an earlier raid. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried weight. They think we're animals, Sue had whispered to Tay the night before. Let them think it. Animals don't plan. The auction began. A Novan in expensive robes stood on a raised platform and spoke in a language that the translation chips in the humans' ears turned into words they could understand. Lot 47. 12 humans, healthy, young, good for labor or display. The bidding started. Numbers flew back and forth. Tay watched the buyers. He noted which ones seemed cruel and which ones seemed merely bored. He looked for patterns. He looked for weakness. A Novan noble stepped forward. He was dressed in dark red fabric that shimmered under the station's lights. His 4 eyes moved slowly across the line of humans. When he reached Tay, he stopped. This one, the noble said. He's not afraid. The auctioneer checked the screen. Lot 47, Specimen 8. Former military. Captured during the 3rd colonial sweep. No behavioral problems recorded. No behavioral problems, the noble repeated. He leaned closer to Tay. You understand me, don't you? You know exactly what's happening. Tay said nothing. He kept his face empty. The noble smiled. It was not a kind smile. Interesting. I'll take him. And those 2 as well. He pointed at Hannah and Sue. The price was paid. The restraints were transferred to new controllers. Within an hour, Tay, Hannah, and Sue were walking through the corridors of the station toward a private dock where the noble's ship waited. The noble's name was Lord Vec. He owned lands on the Novan homeworld, factories on 3 moons, and more slaves than he could count. Humans were new to his collection. He found them fascinating. Your kind is strange, Vec said as they boarded his ship. So soft, so breakable. And yet, you spread across your little corner of space like insects. How did you survive? Tay remained silent. Hannah stared at the floor. Only Sue answered. We're stubborn, the old man said quietly. It's our greatest gift and our worst curse. Vec laughed. Stubborn. Yes, I've heard that about humans. You don't know when to quit. He gestured to a guard. Take them to the holding quarters. Clean them. Feed them. I want them presentable by the time we reach home. The ship hummed to life. Through a small window, Tay watched the auction station grow smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among millions. He was leaving everything he had known. He was going deeper into enemy territory, and he was paying attention to everything. The journey took 6 days. During that time, Tay counted the guards. There were 12. He memorized their faces, their patrol routes, the weapons they carried. He noted which doors required codes and which ones responded to touch. He studied the layout of the ship until he could walk it blindfolded. Hana did the same. At night, when the guards thought they were sleeping, she would whisper to Tay. The door panels use a simple circuit, she said. I could bypass it with the right tools. Not yet, Tay replied. We need to see more. Learn more. We're not ready. Sue lay on his mat nearby, his eyes closed. But he was not sleeping. He was listening. And sometimes, late at night, he would share pieces of information he had gathered over his 3 years of captivity. There are thousands of us, Sue said one night. Humans, scattered across the empire. They use us for labor, for entertainment, for experiments. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. Most of us don't last long, but some survive. Some remember what we were. Where are they? Tay asked. Everywhere. Mining colonies, agricultural stations, noble estates like where we're going. Sue opened his eyes and looked at Tay. If someone organized them, if someone gave them a signal, things could change. Tay thought about this for a long time. When the ship finally landed on the Novan homeworld, Tay stepped out into alien sunlight. The sky was purple. The trees were black. Everything was wrong and strange and beautiful in a terrible way. Lord Vec walked ahead of them, proud and confident. He had no idea what he had just brought into his home. As they were led toward the estate, Tay leaned close to Hana. Count everything, he whispered. Forget nothing. Hana nodded slightly. Behind them, Sue smiled for the first time in years. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just seen the first spark of something dangerous. The Novans had bought them like property. They expected obedience. They expected fear. They had no idea what was coming. 3 months passed on Lord Vec's estate. The days were long and the work was light, but the chains were still there. Invisible but real. Tay had become Vec's personal attendant. He stood in corners during meetings. He poured drinks at dinners. He was expected to be silent and useful, like furniture that could move. The Novans barely noticed him. This was exactly what he wanted. Every day, Tay learned something new. He learned the names of important visitors. He learned which nobles hated each other and which ones were allies. He learned that the Novan Empire was not as strong as it appeared. There were cracks beneath the surface. Rival factions fought for power. Outer colonies complained about taxes. The military was spread thin across too many systems. All of this, Tay stored in his memory, like ammunition. Hana worked in the estate's maintenance section. The Novans had discovered she was good with machines, and they put her to work fixing broken equipment. This gave her access to parts of the estate that others never saw. She found that the security systems were old. The Novans had built them to guard against Novan threats. They had never considered that a small, soft human might be a danger. The biometric scanners did not recognize human handprints. The motion sensors were set for creatures taller than 6 feet. Hana could move through certain areas completely undetected. She did not escape. Not yet. Instead, she mapped everything. She made mental notes of every weakness, every blind spot, Every system that could be turned against its masters. Sue worked in the gardens. It was peaceful work for an old man, planting flowers and trimming trees under an alien sky. But Sue was not just gardening. He was making contacts. Other slaves worked on the estate. Not just humans, but members of a dozen other species the Novans had conquered over centuries. Sue spoke to them quietly, carefully. He learned who could be trusted and who would report them to the masters. There were other humans too. A woman named Bora, who worked in the kitchens. A young man named Jin, who cleaned the guest quarters. They had been slaves for years, but their spirits were not broken. They had simply learned to hide their anger behind empty faces. Sue connected them all. Slowly, carefully, he built a network of whispers. Lord Vec had a daughter named Kira. She was young by Novan standards, curious and restless. She found the humans fascinating in a way her father did not understand. One day, she came to Hannah while the engineer was repairing a heating unit. "You're from Earth," Kira said. It was not a question. Hannah nodded but did not stop working. "What's it like? Your world?" Hannah thought for a moment. "Blue," she said finally. "Mostly water. Green lands. White clouds. Very different from here. It sounds primitive." "We thought so too once." Hannah looked up at the alien girl. "Then we went to space. We built cities that floated in orbit. We sent ships to other stars. We're not as primitive as we look." Kira laughed. "But you couldn't stop us from taking you." "No," Hannah admitted. "We couldn't, but we learned from our mistakes." Something in Hannah's voice made Kira uneasy. She changed the subject and walked away. But she kept coming back. Day after day, she asked questions about Earth, about human history, about the strange little species that had come from so far away. Hannah answered honestly. She told Kira about human wars, the great conflicts that had killed millions, the weapons that could destroy cities in a single flash, the empires that had risen and fallen over thousands of years. Kira was horrified. "You killed each other? Your own kind?" "Many times," Hannah said. "Over what? Territory? Resources?" Hannah smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Sometimes. Sometimes over ideas. Sometimes over pride. Sometimes just because someone told us we couldn't win. Kira stopped laughing at humans after that. Meanwhile, Tay continued his silent work. One night, during a grand party at the estate, he overheard a conversation that changed everything. Lord Vec was speaking with a military commander named Zell. They stood in a corner, drinking expensive wine, speaking in low voices. They thought no one was listening. They were wrong. "The human homeworld," Zell said. "We've located it. A planet called Earth in a system they call Sol. Primitive defenses. Maybe a few hundred ships at most. A full invasion?" Vec asked. "Not yet. First, we'll take their outer colonies. Cut off their resources. Then, when they're weak, we'll take Earth itself." Zell smiled with all four of his eyes. "In 10 years, there won't be any free humans left in the galaxy." Tay's blood went cold, but his face showed nothing. He refilled their glasses and stepped back into the shadows. That night, he told Hannah and Sue what he had heard. 10 years, Hannah whispered. "That's all the time Earth has." "No," Tay said. "That's all the time we have. We can't wait for rescue. We can't hope someone else will fix this. If we want to survive, we have to act." Sue nodded slowly. "I know where they keep the communication equipment. Military-grade transmitters. If we could get access, we could send a signal. Warn Earth. Connect with other humans across the Empire." "Can you do it?" Tay asked. Sue's tired eyes suddenly looked younger, sharper. "I was a communications officer before they took me. I built systems like these. I can make them sing." The plan began to form. They would steal a transmitter. They would contact every human slave in Novan space. They would warn Earth of the coming invasion. And then, when the time was right, they would rise. But first, they needed information. Tay needed to know where all the humans were. How many? What resources they had? What they could do. 3 weeks later, Tay found his answer. During a meeting in Vec's office, a data chip was left unguarded on a desk. It contained military files, shipping manifests, lists of every slave camp, every mining colony, every estate where humans were held. Tay took it. He hid it in his clothing and walked out of the room as calmly as he had entered. That night, Hana decoded the chip using stolen tools. The numbers were staggering. 12,000 humans, scattered across 47 worlds. Most of them had been slaves for years. All of them were waiting for something to believe in. "This is it," Hana said, staring at the data. "This is everything we need." Tay looked at the glowing screen. 12,000 people who had been bought and sold like animals. 12,000 people who had been forgotten by the universe. Not anymore. "Start making contacts," Tay said. "Everyone we can trust. Tell them to wait. Tell them to prepare. Tell them the signal is coming." Sue smiled his old, tired smile. "And what will the signal say?" Tay thought for a moment. Then he answered, "Now." Outside, the purple sky was dark and full of unfamiliar stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was waiting. And somewhere in the shadows of the Novan Empire, humanity was beginning to wake up. The Novans still saw them as property, as pets, as harmless little creatures from a forgotten corner of space. They would learn. They would all learn. 6 more months passed. The network grew in silence. Sue had found a way to access the estate's old communication array. It was a backup system, forgotten in a storage room beneath the gardens. The Novans had not used it in years. They had no idea it still worked. Every night, when the guards changed shifts and the estate fell quiet, Sue would slip away. He sent coded messages to other humans across the empire. Short bursts that looked like system noise. Random signals that the Novan monitors ignored, but they were not random. They were words. Instructions. Hope. The replies came slowly at first. A mining colony on the outer rim. A factory on a frozen moon. An agricultural station where humans worked the fields under armed watch. One by one, they answered. Yes, we are here. We are ready. We are waiting. Hannah built the tools they would need. She stole parts from broken machines. She hid weapons in places the guards never checked. A knife under a floor panel. A shock device inside a cleaning cart. Nothing big. Nothing obvious. But enough. She also sabotaged things. Small things. A security door that stuck for half a second too long. A weapon locker with a faulty lock. An alarm system with a 3-second delay. The Novans never noticed. They trusted their technology too much. Tay continued to serve Lord Vec. He poured drinks. He stood in corners. He listened. And he planned. The network now included humans on 32 worlds. Not all 12,000, but enough. The message had spread through whispers and stolen signals. Something was coming. Something big. But they needed more. They needed weapons. Real weapons. Kira was the answer Tay had not expected. She had changed over the months. Her conversations with Hana had planted seeds of doubt. She still lived in luxury, still enjoyed the privileges of noble life, but she no longer laughed at the slaves. She no longer saw them as animals. She saw them as people. And that changed everything. One night, Kira found Tay alone in the garden. The moons were high, and the estate was quiet. She approached him carefully, like someone approaching a wild animal. "I know what you're doing," she said. Tay's body tensed. His mind raced through options. Could he silence her before she raised an alarm? Could he run? Could he explain? But Kira did not call for guards. She did not run away. She just stood there, looking at him with her 4 alien eyes. The messages, she continued. The stolen data. The tools Hana hides. I've been watching. Then why haven't you reported us? Tay asked. His voice was calm, but his heart was pounding. Because I've been listening too. Kira looked away. I heard what Commander Zell said at the party. About invading your homeworld. About making sure no free humans exist. She paused. That's not war. That's extinction. Tay said nothing. He waited. My people have done terrible things, Kira said. I didn't understand before. I thought it was normal. I thought every empire worked this way. But then I talked to Hana. She told me about your history. Your wars. Your mistakes. And she told me that you learned. You changed. You became better. Sometimes, Tay admitted. Not always, but you tried. Kira turned back to face him. The Novan Empire doesn't try. We just take. We conquer. We enslave. And we tell ourselves it's right because we're stronger. Her voice cracked. But strength isn't the same as right, is it? Tay looked at this alien girl who had grown up with everything and understood nothing. She was trying to become something better. It was not easy. It was not comfortable. But she was trying. No, he said finally. It's not. Kira was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke again. My father's private armory. There are weapons there. Energy rifles, explosives, enough to arm a small army. She handed Tay a small data chip. These are the access codes. I changed them last week. Only I know them now. Tay took the chip. It was warm from her hand. Why? He asked. Kira smiled sadly. Because when the history is written, I don't want to be on the wrong side. And because Hana told me something once. She said humans never forget who helped them and who hurt them. I want to be remembered as someone who helped. She walked away before Tay could respond. He watched her go, the chip heavy in his palm. That night, Tay called a meeting. Hana, Sue, Bora, Jin, and 3 others gathered in the hidden room beneath the gardens. He told them about Kira, about the weapons, about what was coming. This is it, Tay said. We have everything we need. Weapons, communications, people on 32 worlds ready to move. If we wait any longer, they'll catch us. If we move too soon, we'll fail. But there's a moment coming. A perfect moment. And we have to be ready. Sue nodded. Commander Zell is hosting a celebration next month. Every major military leader in this sector will be there. Security will be focused on protecting them. It will be the best time to strike. Everywhere at once, Hana added. If we hit them on multiple worlds at the same moment, they won't be able to respond. Their communications will be jammed. Their reinforcements will be too slow. By the time they understand what's happening, it will be too late. Tay looked around at the faces in the dim light. These people had been slaves, property, numbers on a list. But they had never stopped being human. They had never stopped hoping. Send the word, Tay said. Tell everyone. 1 month from now, when the celebration begins, we move. The signal will be one word. When they hear it, they strike. No hesitation. No mercy. We fight until we're free or we die trying. What's the word? Bora asked. Tay thought about all the years of suffering. All the people who had been taken. All the families that had been destroyed. He thought about Earth, waiting in the darkness, not knowing that an invasion was coming. Now, he said. The word is now. The message went out that night. 32 worlds. Thousands of humans. all of them waiting for a single word. The Novan Empire slept peacefully. Their guards patrolled their walls. Their nobles enjoyed their parties. Their military planned their invasion. They had no idea that in the shadows, in the places they never looked, a fire was already burning, and fires, once started, are very hard to stop. Tay stood alone in the garden after the others left. He looked up at the alien stars and thought about home. He wondered if he would ever see blue skies again. He wondered if he would survive what was coming. But doubt was a luxury he could not afford. Not now, not ever. He was a soldier. He had always been a soldier. And soldiers do not wonder. They act. In 1 month, the galaxy would change forever. The Novans just didn't know it yet. The night of the celebration arrived. Across the Novan Empire, thousands of aliens gathered to honor their military leaders. There was music and feasting and speeches about the glory of conquest. No one noticed that the servants moved a little differently. No one saw the looks that passed between human slaves in the shadows. No one felt the storm that was about to break. At Lord Vex's estate, the great hall was full of important guests. Commander Zell stood at the center, surrounded by admirals and generals. They raised their glasses and boasted about the coming invasion of Earth. They laughed about how easy it would be. Tay stood in the corner, dressed in servant's clothes, holding a tray of drinks. His heart was steady. His hands did not shake. He had waited months for this moment. At exactly midnight, Sue pressed a button in the hidden room beneath the gardens. A single word went out across all channels. Now, everything happened at once. The lights in the great hall flickered and died. Emergency power failed to activate because Hana had disconnected it 2 days ago. In the darkness, screams began. Tay dropped his tray and pulled out the energy pistol he had hidden under his jacket. He fired 3 times. 3 guards fell before they could draw their weapons. Around him, other humans did the same. Kitchen workers, cleaners, servants who had been invisible for years suddenly became the most dangerous people in the room. The Novans had never trained for this. Their security was designed to stop armies, not to fight people who were already inside their walls. They stumbled in the darkness while the humans moved with perfect coordination. Hannah took control of the communication hub. Her fingers flew across the controls as she jammed military channels and broadcast to other rebelling humans. On her screens, she could see reports coming in from across the empire. Mining colonies in flames. Factory workers seizing control. Agricultural stations turning their machines into weapons. It was working. All of it was working. In the Great Hall, Tay pushed through the chaos toward Commander Zell. The military leader was surrounded by his personal guards, their weapons drawn, their 4 eyes searching the darkness for threats. Tay did not hesitate. He fired at the guards one by one, using the confusion as cover. When the last guard fell, Zell was alone. "You," Zell said, recognizing Tay. "The servant. The quiet one." "I was never quiet," Tay replied. "You just weren't listening." He did not kill Zell, not yet. Death would be too easy for someone who had planned the extinction of humanity. Instead, he knocked the commander unconscious with the butt of his pistol. There would be time for justice later. Outside, Bora led a team through the estate's corridors. They freed humans from locked quarters and armed them with weapons from Vex's armory. Within an hour, the estate was under human control. But victory came with a price. Sue was still in the communication room when Novan reinforcements arrived. They had called for help before the jamming started. A squad of soldiers breached the hidden entrance and poured inside. Sue kept transmitting. His old hands moved across the controls, sending coordinates and instructions to rebelling humans across 32 worlds. He did not stop. He could not stop. Not until the message was complete. The soldiers fired. Sue's body jerked as energy bolts tore through him. But his fingers kept moving. One more command. One more message. One more second of hope for his people. He finished the transmission just as he fell. The last thing he saw was Hana running toward him, screaming his name. The last thing he felt was peace. He had been a slave for 3 years. Tonight, he died free. Hana held Sue's body and wept. But there was no time for grief. Not now. She wiped her tears and turned back to the controls. Sue's work was done. Hers was just beginning. The battle for the estate lasted until dawn. When the purple sun rose, the Novan flag had been torn down. In its place flew something new. A simple piece of white cloth with a blue circle in the center. It was not the flag of any nation. It was the flag of Earth, the flag of humanity. Lord Vec was captured alive. He knelt in the ruins of his great hall, surrounded by the slaves he had once owned. He could not understand what had happened. His world had been turned upside down in a single night. Tay stood before him, covered in blood and dirt and exhaustion. "We gave you comfort," Vec said, his voice shaking. "We treated you better than most." Tay's face showed no emotion. "You bought us. That was your first mistake." He leaned closer. "You forgot us. That was your last." Reports came in throughout the morning. Across the Empire, humans had risen. Not everywhere. Not everyone. But enough. Power stations had been seized. Supply lines had been cut. Military bases had been sabotaged from within. The Novan Empire was built on the labor of slaves. Now that labor had turned against them, and they had no idea how to stop it. Commander Zell woke up in a cell. His fleet was in chaos. His communications were jammed. His perfectly planned invasion of Earth was falling apart before it even began. Hana worked at her console, coordinating with rebel groups across the sector. She was tired and grieving and terrified. But she kept working. Sue had given his life to send those messages. She would not let his sacrifice be wasted. And then something appeared on her sensors. Something that made her heart stop. Ships coming out of hyperspace. Hundreds of them. For one terrible moment, she thought it was a Novan counterattack. She thought it was the end. Then the identification signals came through. The ships were human. Earth had received the warning. 5 years ago, when the colonies were raided, humanity had not simply grieved and forgotten. They had prepared. They had built. They had trained. And now they had come. Tay stood outside as the first human ships descended through the purple sky. They were beautiful, sleek and powerful and full of weapons that the Novans had never seen. Weapons built by humans for humans. Weapons designed to end empires. Hana's voice came through his communicator, shaking with emotion. "Tay, it's the fleet. The Earth fleet. They're here." They actually came. Tay watched the ships land on the ruins of Lord Vec's estate. Soldiers in human uniforms poured out, their weapons ready, their faces hard with determination. One of them approached. Tay. She was a woman in her 40s with the insignia of an admiral on her chest. Her eyes were cold and sharp, like a blade that had been honed for years. "I'm Admiral Yuna," she said. "We received your signal." Tay straightened. He was still wearing servant's clothes, still covered in the blood of the night's battle. But he stood like a soldier. "How many ships?" he asked. 300, Yuna replied. "And more are coming. Earth has been building since the day you were taken." A voice hardened. "The Novans thought they could erase us. They were wrong. Now we're going to teach them what happens when you try to destroy humanity." The war had just begun, but for the first time in 5 years, Tay felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. The war lasted 8 months. It felt like a lifetime. Admiral Yuna commanded the Earth fleet with cold precision. She had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. Every ship, every weapon, every strategy had been designed for one purpose: to make the Novan Empire pay for what they had done. The first battles were brutal. The Novans had ruled the galaxy for centuries. They had technology that humanity had never seen. They had ships that could crack planets and weapons that could burn cities from orbit. But they did not have humanity's anger. They did not have humanity's memory. They did not have 5 years of rage compressed into every soldier, every pilot, every commander who had lost someone to the slave raids. Tay led ground forces in the liberation of human slave camps. He moved from world to world, breaking open the doors of prisons and mines and factories. Each time the scene was the same. Thin, exhausted humans looked up at their rescuers with eyes that had forgotten how to hope. Then they saw the uniforms. They saw the flags. They understood, and they wept. Hannah stayed aboard the flagship, coordinating communications between the fleet and the scattered rebel groups. She worked 20-hour days, her fingers flying across holographic displays, her mind tracking 1,000 different battles at once. Sue had given her the tools. Now she used them to tear down an empire. Kira helped too. The Novan noblewoman had fully committed to the human cause. She knew her people's secrets. She knew their weaknesses. She knew which commanders would surrender and which ones would fight to the death. More importantly, she knew how to talk to them. The war is already lost, she broadcast to Novan forces across the sector. Your supply lines are cut. Your reinforcements are gone. Your slaves have turned against you. You can die fighting for an empire that never deserved your loyalty. Or you can live and build something better. Some listened. Some did not. Those who surrendered were treated fairly. Those who fought were destroyed. The battles pushed deeper into Novan space. Human ships carved through enemy fleets like knives through water. The technology they had captured and studied for 5 years was now being used against its creators. Novan weapons fired from human ships. Novan shields protected human soldiers. Everything the Empire had built was being turned against them. Commander Zell made his final stand at the Imperial capital. He had gathered every remaining ship, every surviving soldier, every weapon he could find. It was the largest military force in Novan history. Admiral Yuna did not hesitate. The battle above the capital lasted 3 days. Ships burned in the void. Debris fell through the atmosphere like metal rain. The Novan fleet fought with the desperation of a dying beast, but desperation was not enough. On the 3rd day, Zell's flagship was surrounded. His weapons were drained. His shields were failing. His crew was dead or dying around him. Admiral Yuna gave him one chance to surrender. He refused. "We are the masters of this galaxy," Zell said over the communication channel. His voice was rough with exhaustion and defeat. "You are insects, animals. You cannot win." Yuna's response was simple. "We already have." Her ships opened fire. Zell's flagship broke apart in seconds. The commander who had planned humanity's extinction died alone in the cold darkness of space, surrounded by the wreckage of everything he had believed in. The war ended that day. What remained of the Novan government sued for peace. Their empire, which had ruled for centuries, collapsed in less than a year. Human ships landed on 47 worlds. They opened every slave camp, every prison, every factory where humans had been held. 12,000 people were freed. Not all of them survived the liberation. Years of captivity had broken some beyond repair. But most walked out into the light with their heads held high. They were free. After everything, they were finally free. The peace treaty was signed on the Novan homeworld, in the ruins of a government building that had once controlled an empire. Admiral Yuna sat on one side of the table. The remaining Novan leaders sat on the other. Their 4 eyes would not meet hers. The terms were harsh but fair. The slave trade was abolished. Reparations were paid to every human who had been held captive. The Nova military was disbanded and their weapons were destroyed, and humanity's place in the galaxy was recognized. No longer a small, forgotten species on the edge of known space. Now a power that had brought down an empire and earned the respect of every civilization that had been watching. Tay did not attend the signing ceremony. He was on a quiet world far from the capital, overseeing the last liberation. The slave camp there was small, only 100 humans. But each one was precious. Hannah found him standing outside as the former prisoners boarded transport ships. They would be taken home, to Earth, to families who had never stopped hoping. "The war is over," Hannah said, standing beside him. "I know, so what now?" Tay watched the ships rise into the sky. He thought about Sue, who had died to send the signal. He thought about the thousands who had fallen in the uprising and the war that followed. He thought about the long years of captivity, when hope was a crime and survival was all that mattered. "Now we make sure it never happens again," he said. Hannah nodded. She understood. Kira approached them slowly. She was no longer dressed in noble robes. She wore simple human clothing now, a choice she had made the day her people surrendered. "My father is being held for trial," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was pain underneath. "They'll probably execute him." Tay looked at her. "Does that bother you?" Kira was quiet for a long moment. He owned slaves. He treated them like property. He laughed at their suffering. She took a breath. "But he was still my father, and I have to live with what I've done." "You saved us," Hannah said. "Without the armory codes, we might have failed. Without your broadcasts, thousands of Novans would have died fighting instead of surrendering." "I know." Kira's eyes were wet, but she did not cry. "I just wish there had been another way." Tay understood. War was never clean. Victory always came with scars, but it was still victory. Months later, Tay stood on Earth for the first time since his capture. The sky was blue, like Hannah had said. The clouds were white. The air smelled like home. He had not expected to feel so much. All those years of being cold and hard and focused had built walls around his heart. But standing on his own world, breathing his own air, those walls crumbled. He wept. For the first time since the auction, he let himself feel everything. The grief and the rage and the hope and the relief. It came out of him in waves, and he did not try to stop it. Hannah found him sitting on a hillside overlooking a city. Ships flew overhead, carrying freed slaves home. Families were being reunited. Children were seeing parents they had thought were lost forever. "You did this," Hannah said, sitting beside him. "All of this. Because you counted everything and forgot nothing." Tay shook his head. "We did this. All of us. Sue, Bora, Jin, Kira, the thousands who rose when the signal came. The fleet that crossed the galaxy to save us. Everyone." He looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was changing. Species who had ignored humanity for centuries were now watching with new eyes. Some with fear. Some with respect. Some with both. "They bought us like property," Tay said quietly. "They thought we were animals, pets, things to be used and discarded." Hannah nodded. "They never expected a galactic war." Tay smiled for the first time in years. A real smile. But that's what happens when you underestimate humans. We survive. We adapt. We remember. And when the time comes, we fight. He stood up and looked toward the city. Toward the future. Now they'll never forget. The wind carried his words away. But the lesson would echo across the galaxy for 10,000 years. Humans are not prey. They are not pets. They are not property. They are something far more dangerous. They are survivors. And survivors never stay down for long.